Hi, this is Joe, Macro Builder. This is another little macro I wrote for one of my customers that had data coming out of a relational database for reps territories. And that data had to be used as input to another process, which would take the rep territory and compare it to the CRM system to come up with a territory plan for management or territory report for management on each one of the reps. So what we have is this is what the data looks like when it's done. Um, the data as it comes out of the relational database, you define a rep's territory by what country it's located in, if it's by customer numbers or if it's some grouping ID, like if it belongs to a group like mid-market customers, or if it belongs to a buying group, if there's a buying group that the customer belongs to. So anyway, it has all of these sort of segmentation dimensions, and when the output comes from the rep territory database, every dimension is its own row in the output. So if we look at the data here, here's the input data. And basically you have a rep going across here, and you have the dimension in column L, the name of the dimension, and the value of the dimension in M. And so you can see for like this rep here in the front, there's probably, 100 rows which define this territory based on the country it's in, and each one of these rows, each one of these territories is defined by an ID, which I use to do my lookups based on. So when you bring the data over here, you basically, it massages the data a little bit to put it into a format it can work with, and then it outputs the consolidated data into another tab, which is this tab here. So this is what it looks like when it's done. So what it would do is it takes a single rep, and the rep's territory can be defined two ways. It can be defined with what's in the territory and what's excluded from the territory. So if it's a grouping dimension, might say he owns everything in this country except for 8 customer numbers. So it says everything in country XYZ except for these 8 customer numbers. So there's an inclusion statement and an exclusion statement. So if there's the combination of the two, that ends up being 2 rows over here. If it's all inclusions, it ends up as 1 row. So let's clear this out so you can see this thing run. And I'm just going to clear the data. So I left a couple rows in there just to be safe, and I'll hit the run button. And so what it does is, like, that first rep we saw had over 100 rows. It reduces that to a single row. So let's run it. It's very fast. So the input data was about 1,100 rows. When it's done, it gives you messages like says there are some operands which require eyeballing, and so it says, did it find any ands? It did not find any ands, Boolean ands in the database. And then it says there are some unprocessed dimensions that it didn't recognize, to look at column AO to see what it was. And in this case, they are dimensions that are meaningless, so we didn't need to worry about that. And it says evaluate the results, look through it just to make sure it looks correct, and remove the duplicate definitions, because it can generate duplicate definitions based on the input. And so what it does next is we can then look at these. This is 75 rows of data here. We can look at it and see if there's any duplicates in here by running another macro, which is this one here. And so it went from 75 to 72, so it found 3 pure duplicates and removed them. So now this data is more easy to read because you can look at a single rep going across. You can see what country they're in, what is the dimensions that define the territory, and then it has a reference back to that reference ID back in the original. So if there's any questions about this rep, you can go look at the original data for this reference number to see if this reflects truly what's in that rep's territory. So basically it reduced 1,100 rows down to 71 rows. That's like a 1/15th the original size of the data. It is much more human readable than what we had before. So if I were to have to look at 1,100 rows to look at these reps to see if the data is defined correctly, it would be hard to do. So it's human readable, and then it's processed and formatted correctly for the next process downstream, which is to generate a database report of the territory for management. So you can see that you can do things like this. It actually cleans up the data. It adds, based on if it's a number, if it has leading zeros, it puts leading zeros in place, which Excel likes to delete. So it makes sure that there's leading zeros where leading zeros belongs. It treats number strings in here, which are dimensions, as character strings, so that it doesn't convert like this thing here, which is a 3 country numbers in a row separate by commas, that's not a number in the hundreds of millions. That's a number, those are just three separate numbers. So it doesn't convert this to a number, which would cause problems for the next process downstream. So again, this is an example of something you can do in a macro. The client I have runs this about a couple of times a week to update reports, and then the data comes out perfectly, and the next process just loves it. So again, this is Joe at Macro Builder. If you have data conversion needs that you want to do in Excel, or it's easier for you to do in Excel, then give me a call, Joe at macrobuilders.com, and I'd love to talk to you.